Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Everyday Heroes of Effective Giving series by Intentional Insights. I'm Dr. Gleb Sapursky, the president of Intentional Insights and the host of the series. And we're here with T. Barnett, who will tell us about his story of effective giving. So, T, the first question I have for you is to ask you to introduce yourself, describe how you would define effective giving, and what makes you passionate about it. Please go ahead, T.
Yeah, so as Gleb mentioned, I'm T, the Chief Operations Officer at Students for High Impact Charity. In Vancouver, there's a decent sized contingency of us out here, and I answered a job posting randomly enough. It wasn't one of those things where, I stumbled upon a Less Wrong article or ran into Will's book, although I will say that my father bought me a copy of Will's book that was just like sitting on my bookshelf gathering dust, and I hadn't even cracked it open. And then I only found out a couple months later that it was an effective altruism book. So I got involved with charity science, and while the senior leadership was headed to India to start their new direct level venture, together with Baxter Bullock, who's also the co-founder of Students for High Impact Charities, started taking over day-to-day operations for charity science. That's where we got a lot of our sort of hands-on understanding of the way an organization works. And then later on, earlier this year, we launched Chic, which is for Students for High Impact Charity. So I've defined effective giving, the core, the essential part of effective giving, as a sort of conscientiousness. And this is something I'll probably come back to later in the conversation when I talk about Students for High Impact Charity and the kind of students that we want to help cultivate. Is that, conscientiousness is a word to me that can extend into all areas of someone's personal development. So they will be aware of, not only their biases, but, how their actions will impact certain people and what the externalities will be or the byproducts of what they do. And, just thinking very carefully about these things. And what makes me passionate about it is that, so I got my MA in International Development in Taipei. And I noticed that there was just quite a bit of pet projects, and there's just a lot of bickering, particularly when I looked at the UN, about sort of, these causes that only affected these areas or these people or these types of people. And I got a little bit disillusioned with that, and I was wondering, as someone who wanted to, perhaps become an ambassador or, a delegate of some kind, am I just going to be bickering for the self-interest of my country? Am I just going to be, representing certain things because I had a family member die of it, or am I going to just have emotional pulls to certain things? So I was kind of looking around, and effective giving, there are various ways that I got sort of into the concept of effective giving, starting with the Copenhagen Consensus Center. But to me, it just means, trying to maximize the best outcome, trying to understand all of the ways in which you can approach something like that. And, there are more principles associated with that, but I think that's what it kind of boils down to for me.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the idea of conscientiousness really represents well the concept of effective giving. So thinking really clearly about the impact you're making on the world and how to make the best possible impact, as opposed to kind of an impact that's just tied with your own personal background, history, emotions, and so on. That's really
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So then the next question I want to ask, well, you've covered some of this territory already, but maybe talking more about your feelings and your ideas, how you got involved. What's the story of you getting really involved with your passions, with your emotions in effective giving? And trace that background for listeners to where you are right now, how you got to be the head of and co-founder of Shift.
Sure. So if I'm starting at the very, very beginning, there was a time, as I was saying, when I was in Taipei, that I heard a podcast from Freakonomics Radio about, I think it was the Freakonomics Radio Bang for the Buck edition. Maybe it'll be in the show notes. Your viewers can have a look at that. But it brought up the Copenhagen Consensus Center, and I believe the head of the CCC at that point was giving an interview on that podcast, and basically just talked about how they went through so there were the Millennium Development Goals, right? And we learned a lot about how those were flawed. And then the next set of Millennium Development Goals were called Sustainable Development Goals. And the CCC basically just approached the UN and really tore into a lot of the things that they proposed, and did that in such a way that I thought was very compelling, which was they took the certain, each goal in each like subcategory in each goal that was like subsumed under the major ones, and highlighted them with certain color markers based on the economic viability of what they wanted to do, and whether these things had the right amount of like flow through effects, for example. Things like retraining the adult workforce were marked in red, and then as something that would have comparatively low returns to something like pursuing neglected tropical diseases, right? And so I just thought, when I heard that podcast, I went on their website and I immediately found this document that you can see for free, and that was just something that opened my eyes to the idea that you can't just debate things based on what are nebulously defined as like the merits of a project, without also thinking about resource allocation and how important that is. So that's essentially how I got started. And then if we were to fast forward a year or so, if we fast forward a year, I'm in the interview with Joey Savoy of Charity Science, and he just sort of looked at my resume and just thought that I ought to be a sort of EA-ish type person. And so, on that basis, he gave me the interview. The interview went pretty well because I happened to mention the Copenhagen Consensus Center, and happened to, I guess, touch on the right points. And so, they brought me on to Charity Science. So I think it was very much just a natural disposition toward wanting to delve into, being more conscientious about, not just the way we approach the biggest problems facing us today, but also, searching for a sort of objective high ground, if there is such a thing. And I realized that, even, statistics can lie. And I completely understand that. And I think that, approaching that takes, there's certain methodological things that people will bicker about. But I think that, infusing that discussion with like I said, the idea of what's most effective is very, 99 times out of 100, extremely, extremely worthwhile for high impact charity. Is that the question that our society needs to ask ourselves is, what kind of student do we want our education system to produce? And I think one of the answers is, at least for the effective altruism movement, is that we want to normalize the idea of setting aside a certain amount of your budget for giving. And, whether you have a purple patch or if you're in lean times or something like that, this amount that you've set aside is sort of untouchable, because that is something that we hope will be just a part of your character. And so, these ideas that are associated with effective altruism, not just, weighing things based on, costs and bang for your buck and viability, but I also think that, the ideas like, setting aside a certain amount, like giving what we can, will propose or advocate for, is very compelling to me, and something that we as an organization would like to pass on to the students that happen to be involved.
Thank you for that description. I think I like the connection you made between conscientiousness and character. how developing people's character to think that way and have that mindset, shifting people's values, developing those positive values is really important. I also very much identify with the idea that, statistics can, of course, lie, and liars can use statistics, but it's much harder to lie with statistics than it is with words.
Absolutely.
And yeah, math makes things more clear than words do, than stories do. And the wonderful thing about orienting toward effective giving is that it's essentially like the scientific method for charity. That's how I like to think about it, that it will update itself over time if we, discover things that we have previously thought were good are now not so good, then we can just shift our resources toward the new things that we think are good. Just like science updates itself through time, making discoveries and improving. And so just like the scientific method is the best method we have for knowing the truth, orienting toward effectiveness is the best method we can have of being more effective.
No, you're right. And on that point, if any younger viewers are watching, I initially, back in my undergraduate, when I studied political science, I wanted to be a lawyer. And so, the typical mindset for being a lawyer, or someone that takes the LSAT as I did, which is for our international viewers, the legal sort of prerequisite test you need to take to get into law school, was that you just need to arrange an argument to prove what you already have decided is the truth, or what you already want to, what you want to prove to other people. And a certain amount of time passed, and then I got through that program and realized that I don't want to approach my life that way. It'd be much better to, as you said, use the scientific method, try to be curious about the world, and try to uncover what the right answer might be, rather than starting from an assumption and trying to, twist things in a certain manner such that it proves what I want it to be. And so you're right when you say, when you mention all those points. I think those are dead on.
Cool. And I'd be curious to learn more about what you're currently doing in the area of effective giving, and specifically how you at SHIC are trying to convey these ideas to students, what kind of plans, ideas, notions you have. I know you have a fundraising campaign going. Maybe you can mention more about that to folks and what website they can find it at. So yeah, tell us more about what you're doing in that area.
Sure, I won't miss an opportunity there. The website, before we start, is shicschools.org, www.shickschools.org. So you can go there and check out our program. So what it really is, Chic, is the very first concerted effort by anyone in the EA movement to target pre-university students in bringing effective altruism and the idea of effective giving to them. So this is a global network of classes and extracurricular clubs that we hope to set up that will sort of reinforce and instill a lot of these values that we think are very important, and that I think most people watching this video are worth having. I have met some truly, truly amazing students that are already on an accelerated trajectory that's well past what I was at the age of 16. One of them being, a young author that's sort of working on a novel right now, is kind of working with us. We have a few others that will be going to EA Global at the age of 16, 17, 18. And these are students that are already in a mindset that's oriented toward helping others and how to do that in the most effective way possible. And I think one of the greatest tragedies would be if students like this exist, and then because they feel like they need to get sort of a marketable job, or skill set or something like that, they go into university, and some of that passion dies out, and they just don't hear about effective altruism or effective giving or what they can do, and then it just sort of disappears, and then at a certain point maybe they will discover it through Will's book, but already by then quite a bit of time has passed, and a lot of their notions about the world have already sort of concretized. and become locked in. So it's much harder to change the mind of somebody, obviously, as you know, who's quite a bit older and has a certain viewpoint on a certain worldview already, than it is to approach a student who already has that natural curiosity and that natural passion, and to channel it into something that we know is really constructive. So that's what we're working on now. We are trying to get, as an optimistic sort of projection, 75 clubs launched by the start of next school year. And that is extremely ambitious because we've been talking to similar type organizations that aren't effective altruist ones, and they just don't try to reach a scale that large or scale that quickly. And I think part of that is because we've dematerialized the whole process, and we've demonetized it. So students don't need to pay for it, and they can just go to our website, which again is www.chicschools.org, and they can just download everything. So I think that helps facilitate that curiosity quite a bit.
Awesome. And I personally know some people involved with CHIC, which is one reason I wanted to invite you to the phone call. There's a student, Owen Shen, who's involved with Intentional Insights.
Owen's great, yeah.
Yeah, starting his own high school club, and Catherine Lowe, who's a teacher who is teaching a number of classes, and she has told me how she really saw students change their minds as a result of the CHIC curriculum. So I can attest that, from personal accounts, it's quite impactful. And that relates to the next question I want to ask. What do you plan to do in the future with CHIC, and more broadly, what kind of a mark do you envision yourself wanting to leave in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the people that you brought up, Owen Shen and Catherine, I did see that you had a talk already with Catherine, which was wonderful to watch. She's one of our absolute most dedicated volunteers and a very important part of what we do. And she, just like Intentional Insights, is primarily volunteer run, and we just have this massive network of people that are kind enough to lend their time to what we do. So, this interview, it may make it seem like a lot of this was sort of the vision of Baxter and I and some of the other people involved, but we absolutely could not have done what we have done or be as big as we are without 50 plus people that at certain times have pitched in. And so if anybody watching this video would like to see the inner workings of CHIC, you can send me a message. I'm sure Gleb will put my information on here, and we'll hook you up with our Slack. We like to have people involved in our Slack so that they can sort of join this community around the world of people that are pitching in, even if it's only 2 to 5 hours, just making this whole thing work. So to get to the question that you asked, I'm sorry, I digressed there a little bit.
No problem.
The question was what kind of mark would we like to leave? And so my Google, Amazon, Apple type dream is that we will be the largest club or curriculum provider for world development or anything on that subject in the entire world. And so I think we can achieve that. I think it's definitely very ambitious, but the space isn't as crowded as people might think. And especially if you were to Google something like extracurricular club charity or curriculum and charity or something like that. There's just not much of these things around, and that's the sort of gap that we wanted to fill. We feel like there's quite a bit of demand for it, but just nobody has really put together a package like this. The example being, like I said before, it's very hard to turn someone from a non-altruistic mindset into one. But what we have in the world, and what we will have in the future, is a very small part of the population, but still a very sizable amount of people, young students, that will be altruists. They will want to go work for the nonprofit sector. They will want to do all of these things. So they'll be naturally receptive to this message and the message that CHIC is putting forward. And so if we can introduce them to this message early on, and try to get them at the very least to be more conscientious about their decision to go into the nonprofit sector, or their decision broadly to say, go into Wall Street and then donate more money, and where to do that, that would just be something that we're hoping to do.
That's a really awesome vision, and that's very much a vision that Intentional Insights shares, which is why we collaborate with SHIC and provide some of our content for SHIC. So to really spread the ideas of effective giving around the world in whatever ways, and I think SHIC does a really excellent job of spreading it through the specific venue of high school clubs. That's really great. So
No,
yeah,
thank
this
you,
has been
thank you, and I think IN does as well, and the kind of articles that Intentional Insights writes that are kind of similar to like Psychology Today type articles are things that I think young people, especially when I was younger, used to like to read those kinds of things, will naturally be drawn to. And sorry, I just wanted to expand a little bit on that point, and maybe when we edit,
sure.
we can add them together or something. Is if we could, essentially try to funnel more of these students that have a natural disposition for being charitable or being altruistic towards a more conscientious understanding of that. I think what we're trying to achieve, on a more broad scale, is more dollars flowing into the most effective charities, more human capital flowing into the most effective charities that will help them excel at doing what they're doing and become even better and more precise. And therefore, that would lift the entire world, hopefully, as a whole. So that is sort of like the logical, the conceptual chain there.
Yeah, that's a really great vision. I like the vision with seeing students as the seeds, and they are definitely folks who are more capable of shifting their perspectives, and their perspectives isn't yet hardened. Well, thank you. This has been a really great interview, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show and share with our viewers your vision.
Thank you, Gleb.
Thank you, T. And this has been another episode of the Everyday Heroes of Effective Giving, produced by Intentional Insights. And I'm the host, Dr. Gleb Sapurski. You can check out Intentional Insights at www.intentionalinsights.org. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.